Welcome to the Big Wealth Podcast. If you notice that we're giggling before we even have gotten into this one, it's because yet again, Eric cannot say his own name. It's Ericonomics. I gotta tell you, it is one of my favorite things on the planet that I get to work with you every day, because it doesn't matter what's happening. I'm always laughing when we're dealing with this. We could be dealing with the world falling apart and you and I would find something to laugh about.
Yep.
So
I'm just stepping on all the rakes. My
right.
mission in life.
I'm good with physical humor.
Yes.
That's great. So we're going to lead into this. And actually today we're going to talk about mindset, because that is such a powerful determinant of what happens with wealth. And specifically what we're going to talk about is scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset, because this will dramatically change the decisions that you make in your life if you are operating from a place of scarcity versus operating from a place of abundance.
Right. Yeah. And it's such a big deal from a standpoint of how you just approach the world, right? We talked about the OODA loop, which I've become obsessed about, but it's that orientation that just kills you.
It is, right? Because if you are viewing the world in a very specific way, your decisions are going to reflect that. And I've seen this change in my own life. I've seen it change in my husband's life. I've seen it change in our clients' lives. And I think this is where there has to be almost a real hard look at what's actually driving the decisions that you're making. Because when you are coming from a place of scarcity, you are driven by ego and fear. And anytime the ego shows up, it is a win-lose situation. In order for you to win, someone else has to lose. And that mindset, in terms of how you see the world, creates a lot of negativity versus an abundance mindset, where the focus is really on love and abundance and, just the good that can happen. And what happens is you create very collaborative situations when you're coming from that mindset, where the outcome is always a win-win focus.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about capitalism and how it should work that kind of centers around a lot of that. And I think that comes from this idea of scarcity. And I actually, I was reading a book by Garrett Gunderson, Killing Sacred Cows.
Right.
And he starts with a lot of conversation about abundance versus scarcity mindset. And he says, look, there is and I'm paraphrasing, I am not reading or quoting this, but the basic gist of what he was saying, or the way I took it, was if you look at how many dollars exist in the United States today,
right,
there's a finite amount. Now that number may move depending on what the Fed is doing and easing and all of that jazz. But
right,
when you really look at it, there's a finite amount of dollars. And so when you view resources as being scarce, you are going to look at that finite amount and say, I just need as many as I can get, because wealth is relative. But
right,
if you look at what happens during a transaction, there is an exchange for value. And so if I'm giving you, Eric, money for a specific reason, it's because you are delivering a value to me that I am willing to part with my money for.
right.
And you think that that value is less than the money, which is why you're giving it away. Right. And I think that value is worth more than what I'm actually giving you, which is why I am purchasing it. And so when you start looking at that exchange or that transaction that occurs, there is an infinite number of times that you can transact with other humans. And every time there is a transaction, there is value that occurs. And
Right.
So if you look at it from that standpoint, there is an infinite amount of value to be acquired and to be given in the universe. And that is a very different mindset than the first one.
Right. Well, and then I think that's the beauty of capitalism on that side of it, is in a not so capitalistic environment, that transaction could be forced.
Right.
And in a capitalistic system, everybody gets to pick and choose whether they want to go make that deal. And so everyone has to buy in on both sides of that transaction, which makes it powerful.
Right. And I've always felt like capitalism at its core is not immoral, it's amoral, right? It's about transacting for values, but who you are transacting with decides the morality of the transaction. And I think that's kind of a key point. So I started thinking about, okay, where does scarcity show up specifically when you're looking at finances? And what I kind of started to realize is sometimes the same root cause can create radically different responses in the person who is who is feeling that feeling, right? Because
Right.
scarcity mentality could be, I'm really worried that I might lose my job or that I won't be able to keep making income. And so I'm going to squirrel away every penny that I have and live on very, very little and live a very small life because
Right.
I have to keep putting this money away just in case. Right. And so I'm going
Because
to
it could
describe.
all go away tomorrow.
Right.
Right.
So to what you just said, it could all go away tomorrow. That also creates a totally different response in other people where instead of squirreling it all away, they just go blow it all because there may be no tomorrow. Right. Or if it's all going to
YOLO.
go away tomorrow, I might as well enjoy it while I can. And so you'll see people with a scarcity mindset also when they get a paycheck, go blow the paycheck and then live on, ramen noodles and canned tuna for a week and a
Right.
half until the next paycheck shows up. So isn't it interesting that the same feeling can cause two completely polar opposite reactions?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's this idea that I think on one end of it, I'm going to go blow it is, well, I've been living off of ramen and tuna for the last X number of months or years anyway. I might as well go enjoy this because nothing's changing in my lifestyle.
Right. Right.
And it's same almost with this fire movement that you and I keep talking about. I feel like there's the same root cause that kind of drives through that movement.
I love the name financial independence, retire early. I 100% love that name. I believe
Right.
in everything, right, that the name implies. But yeah, when you start digging into the movement, it's live on very little, minimize your life, save everything you can. And when you've got $1 million or whatever the number is,
Right.
retire and, live on next to nothing for the rest of your life. But I'm going to argue that's not really living.
Right.
If the idea is actually freedom, really all you've done is said, I'm going to live a very small lifestyle, but I don't have to go to work. And I would argue, based on at least some of the assumptions I've seen, is that not all fire practitioners are actually using legitimate assumptions for what they can spend each year.
Right. Well,
And
and
I
if you
don't know.
hate your job that much, go find another job. I mean, if you're really trying to get out of work as fast as you can because
Yeah.
you hate your job that much, then I've got a different solution for you. And it's just find something else that you're more passionate about.
Well, and I think that's what abundance is really about, is figuring out what you can give and finding ways to create fulfillment through purpose.
Right.
That's if I believe that I am going to have a good experience in my time here on earth and that there's an infinite amount of resources that I can tap into, then I can stop being driven by money, right? And this
Right.
goes back to money being a tool that is meant to help you build a life that you're excited about. Money is not the end result that you're shooting for, right? If it's I just want to have a whole bunch of money in my bank account, but I'm going to live small, my response to that is, to what end?
Right.
I
Why
mean,
did you
what's
work so hard in the first place?
yeah, if you're not going to enjoy it. Whereas if you create an abundance mentality, I feel like it's really about, what you should be thinking about is, how do I relieve the pressure to earn and the pressure to think about money so that I can be in the moment and fully present and living up to the potential that I have been given by my creator, right? So that I can make a difference while I'm here on the planet. And there's a difference between thinking about, what am I going to get, which is, again, ego, that's
Right.
fear, that's scarcity, and what am I going to give, which is all about love and abundance. Because at least in my experience, when I'm like, ooh, I have a secret sauce and I'm not going to share it with anyone, that doesn't create abundance. Whereas when I stand up and I say, look, I'm going to give away everything that I know, it's amazing what comes out of that.
Right. Well, because it's from a different source, right? And we had this conversation this weekend of some people that are not sort of natural born citizens, that haven't been part of the capitalistic system for a long time. They come over and they've got some secret knowledge, just like you're talking about. And whether it's construction or whatever industry they go into when they're first coming over, and that's what their industry is. And they don't want to share the secrets that they've learned. They don't want to share, hey, I found this tool that'll work, or I found this person that can help you do your job better, because if I help you and you end up doing better, then we're splitting a pie and I get less.
Right.
Versus, what if we all grow? What if we all got better at
What if we
our
all get better?
craft? Right.
Then everyone is better. And that I had the opportunity to have a coffee breakfast meeting with another advisor who's in our area. Was it last week? It was probably last week. And I was sitting down talking to her, and there were some similarities in terms of approach. And as we were leaving, what I said to her was, I would love to sit down and like create a study group if you want to find some other women that have similar mindsets and client focuses where we're really trying to make people's lives better. And I'd love to create a situation where we can all learn from each other. And I was quite pleased that she was like, I think that would be a great idea, because I've suggested that to other advisors in the past, thinking, hey, if we all sit down and share what we know, we'll all
Right.
get better. Because the reality is, people are going to gravitate towards you or towards me, in part because of personality, in part
Sure.
because of knowledge, right? But there's so many people that we can help in this world. I'm not too worried if one decides to pick you over me, right?
Right.
There's plenty of other people
There's
that I
7
can
billion
serve.
people
I
I
can
can
serve and
find.
talk to so many people, right?
Right.
And so it was really kind of exciting to get to see that. But I think this shows up in the decisions that we make financially as well, because
Sure.
if you're coming from a scarcity mentality, and I'll talk to where I've battled this a little bit on my own as well. I remember kind of probably right around the time we were starting with our initial episodes of this podcast, maybe right before, I had my heart set on a property that was in Taos. And granted, and I look at that and I was like, this is the one, but the timing wasn't right because my husband wasn't on board.
Right.
And part of that was because I sprung it on him, and he takes a while to get used to ideas and, think through them. One of his key strengths is deliberative. I talk about it a lot, probably because it is one of the things that I respect most about him, is his ability to think through complex problems. But it also drives me crazy because I want to do everything really quickly. And
Right.
so it's
He's
great
a
from a
good yin to your yang on that
Yes.
side. Right.
Oh, he keeps me out of trouble because of that all the time. But, we showed up and I was like, ooh, I'm going to call a realtor. Ooh, I'm going to buy a property. And in my head, I've already done all the math and I've thought through all the reasons that I want it. And I've shared zero of this with him. Right. So
Right.
he was like, I'm not doing this. I don't understand why you want it or how you got to this. Like, you haven't talked about any of this with me. It feels impulsive to him. Right. And so I
Right.
was furious because I was like, this house was a good deal. We're never going to find a deal that's this good. All the memories we could have made in this house, we don't get to make now. And it was all about lack, right? It was the things that I
Oh,
wasn't going to have. And I remember having a conversation with my coach, Kevin Keppel, and he said to me, can you get that somewhere else? And I was like, what? And he's like, let go of the outcome. You can find something that's at least that good, if not better. There's so many choices. And I
right.
remember just saying, you don't know at the time, because it wasn't what
What
I
do you
wanted to
know?
hear. Yeah. I don't know. You've only coached me into being the best version of myself. What do you know? And it's fascinating because what's happened is several years later, we're in a stronger position financially, right? So the stress of making an acquisition is much lower. And Mike and I decided through conversation, and actually there's a really good original podcast about this with I can't remember. It's the psychologist that we had on, right?
Oh,
And he
right.
talked about when you have a dream for something, what's non-negotiable and what's negotiable.
Right.
And what was not negotiable was making memories with our kids and having a spot that we could go to. And Mike, my husband, pointed out to me that if we bought a lake house instead of buying a house in New Mexico, that rather than it being 10 hours away, it would only
Right.
be an hour and a half away, and we could actually use it much more frequently and therefore create more memories with our kids. And so through this sort of patient year-long approach to, okay, what's happening at the lake, getting used to the prices, there were some deals that probably, if you were just looking at the deal itself, we should have jumped on it. But now we have a property that really suits us because we were patient. And
Right.
that's where I think sometimes people look at it and they're like, I have to get rich quick, right? I need to do it
Yep.
now. That's driven by a scarcity mentality. You have time to make decisions. And I find that frequently when you approach money as patient capital, I'm going to lay the foundation. I'm going to make
Right.
sure everything is solid before I jump into the riskier stuff. You're in that space, Eric. You call it the core and explore. When you take
Right.
care of the core first, it's amazing how you hit that place of abundance because you don't have fear that everything is going to break and fall apart. And so if you find that you are driven by scarcity, and you know that because jealousy shows up, the FOMO, FOLO feelings, that
Right.
kind of thing, right? That probably means that you haven't taken care of your core plan. And that is
Right.
a trigger point for you to go talk to an advisor about a plan, but specifically also about how that plan can help you with those feelings of scarcity and move you into this mindset of abundance so you can enjoy both what you're building, but also create a permission slip to enjoy the dollars you have now guilt free.
Right. Well, and it actually goes back to the fire movement piece of this is if I'm trying to get out of my job as fast as I can because I hate it, then A, I'm in the wrong spot. And B, all I'm thinking about is some future date not being present with where I am and going, you know what? I should work as hard as I can with where I am, right? Grow where you're planted is the phrase I always grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
But grow where you're planted and start working on the next piece, knowing that if you just keep working away and chipping away at it a little bit, you're going to go find or create the job that you want. And then you're going to go move into this other spot. But all along the way, you're being patient, you're growing, you're maturing as an individual, as a business owner, as an employee, right? You're getting better. And it's just the same with capital. I know that at some point I want to get out of my job, but I want to not just get out of my job. I want to have the stress relief from the capital. But if I'm doing all the right things along the way, I have that comfort and then I could go pull that off. And it's funny, you talked about Mike having deliberative as one of his either top one or two.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is connectedness. And the connectedness in the StrengthsFinder architecture is basically being able to see the connection dots between other disparate events.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with a little bit of time, a little bit of just kind of being in something, you start seeing, well, like, wait a minute, this all worked out. I didn't need to
Right.
rush through it. If I was just patient, I saw that all the things that I was trying to rush into, there was a reason I didn't get it. There
Mm-hmm.
was a reason why it wasn't the time, but you can't get that at the beginning. It requires patience to go learn those, lessons.
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely does. And then because you never know where those skill sets are going to pop back up as, wow, I'm so glad I could actually deal with this because I had all of that past experience. And I think, this is where I think sometimes too scarcity shows up as, well, I don't know anyone else who's doing something, so I'm freaked out, or there's got to
Right.
be gotchas, right? Where's the catch is a question that happens a lot. That
Right.
is a very fear driven conversation. And I think when you are looking at a financial plan or which financial advice to talk to, there is a healthy degree of skepticism, right?
Yep.
I need to trust but verify, I think is the way we like to say it in our office. We want you to trust us eventually, but we always want you to verify what we're saying.
Right.
It's not trust blindly, it's trust but verify. But I think really specifically to that, there are a lot of times where we shut ourselves off to possibilities that are better
Right.
than where we are headed currently because we are afraid either that we will be taken advantage of or that we don't understand something. And this is where, again, I think patience pays off. Do the research, and by that I don't mean just Google, right? I mean, do the experiment, run it out. If I do it one way, what are the pros and cons? And if I do it another way, what are the pros and cons? And
Right.
just because you've explored something with one individual doesn't mean you should shut yourself off to the possibility that another individual understands it differently, right?
Yeah.
It has to be, okay, I'm open to the possibility that I deserve abundance in my life and that there are ways to create efficiencies in a plan that don't attach to taking more risk, right?
And that's the
But
hardest part
verify
because
it.
you just assume that it is. If I'm going to get further along in my life, I must take on more risk, more work, more stress. And it's the hardest part to kind of step back and go, it's not really true. It's not
Right.
magical. You got to be patient with it a little bit, but it's just approaching it from a different standpoint.
Well, and the decisions that you're going to make with your money when you are approaching it as a sprint, I've got to do all this now. It has to work out in the next
Right.
3 to 5 years versus, okay, I'm going to lay the foundation for generations, but I'm going to make decisions that create the possibility in the next 3 to 5 years. Those are very, very different contexts. And one is about abundance and what you can provide for yourself in your lifetime and for the next generations that come after you. And the other is about scarcity, which is I need to max everything out in my lifetime and I don't care what happens after that. And I'm going to tell you, if you plan that way, you typically have less than if you plan holistically and generationally,
Right.
right? And how cool is it to have your cake and eat it too, to get to be in a position where you get to spend more during your lifetime, but you've also laid a foundation so that the next generation can use that as a springboard to build for the following generation. And you get to be potentially the starting point for all of that. If that's not exciting, I don't know what is, but I do think it's really hard sometimes to envision that when you are worried about how you're going to put food on the table or what's going to happen if I lose my job next week. And that's where I think taking care of that core plan just changes everything about how you see the world and what you think about as possibilities for your own life.
Yep. Excellent. Where can they find you, Mary?
They can find me at The Wealth Woman on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
And I'm at Economics with Eric, and I didn't botch it. I'm very
Nailed
excited
it.
about that.
Nailed it.
On both Facebook and Instagram as well. Hope you guys have a great week.
See you next time.